Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast. Today's Friday, which means it's a very philosophical day, and I'm joined by not only my Philosophical Friday co-host, Duncan Palamourdas, but also Humberto Jimenez, who's a villager. He's been on the show. You may have heard his story. High-level poker player, Humberto. Welcome, sir.
Hi, thanks for having me, everybody. Good to meet you, Duncan.
Absolutely, Humberto. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
So what's the topic of today's show, Duncan? What do you have cooked up for this Philosophical Friday?
Well, it seems the entire community is talking about a very interesting game that happened in Hustler Casino Live. I mean, we talked a little bit last week. We didn't dig into it. It turns out that it sort of like sparked a lot of interesting topics. The topic of promoting poker to non-professionals. So I guess that will be the main one, promoting poker. The image that we have to outsiders, how do we look? The role that professionals play. Like, this is something that we can think about. We can ponder a little bit about it. And I guess one way we can start the conversation off is first things first. Brad, do you think that and Humberto also, like, do you guys think that professionals owe anything to anyone in terms of marketing, in terms of new poker audiences, in terms of bringing new blood into the game?
So I'll actually let Humberto answer this first, since he's a self-proclaimed poker fanboy who loves all that stuff. Do you think that the influencers or the champions or the people who have accumulated lots of success have a duty to promote the game?
I would say no, and it's because when you're a professional, you're playing with your own money, and so nobody's pretty much your boss. I think the only time that somebody actually like owes somebody like something to the community is when they're quote unquote ambassador and they're getting paid by some company to promote poker. But otherwise, I think no.
So purely transactional, only promote the game if you're making money.
Well, yeah, you're getting like a lot from the company. Like I think that's part of your job. If there's like a job outline, I think a big part of that is to promote the game. And I think when you're a professional, it's different because you're not really like, you don't really have a boss. And so you're kind of just working for yourself, which what I mean is nobody's really doing anything for you, and you're not really doing anything for anybody else.
So I would say, and by the way, I did put you on the spot there, but I actually agree that it's not mandatory, right? Like, I don't think that anybody should think less of any human for not promoting the game of poker, despite the fact that they're a professional poker player and have accumulated success. I think that, as you said, we buy in to tournaments with our own money. There's no sponsorship here. It's just we pay our own way. And with that said, I do think that there are lots of incentives for maybe not promoting the game, but representing the game in a positive way, right? Not yelling at people, not berating folks, not creating an unwelcoming environment to the people you're playing against. I mean, that's more so for the long-term sustainability of the game, so that people keep showing up and people keep playing. But I don't think that, like, you win a World Series of poker, you bought into that tournament with your own money. So if you want to promote, so be it. And if you don't, I don't think you owe poker anything.
I think that's two separate questions. I think there's, should you do anything to promote the game, and then there's like is it just good for yourself to promote the game and just be kind to others, and is that something that you value?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, I also value promoting poker because I love the game and I want it to be healthy and continue to grow in all of these things. So I think, like, it's an individual question and specific to the human, whether or not they want to promote the game or feel compelled to.
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. So there is some good points here, right? I mean, first of all, the person who plays poker, they do assume all the risk, right? This is a very important part, right? When we talk about skin in the game, they have absolutely all the skin in the game, right? I mean, they assume all the risk and they share the benefits potentially, right? So that can be a potential issue. So that's one side of the thing. On the other side of the coin, however, it could be beneficial in the long term, especially if it's low cost. Like, for example, if what it takes is just, to be a proper human being, for example, or like, be polite to others or whatever it might be. If the cost is fairly low, then it could be good for the sustainability of the ecosystem, right? That's another thing to consider. So I think we can all agree. I mean, Doyle Brunson has famously said, "I'm not an entertainer," right? He's sitting there like, "I'm not going to entertain anybody. I'm not gonna." He also says, "I'm not gonna count my chips for anybody." So he's very, rigid about certain things, and he's absolutely right. I mean, he's putting his own stake at the table. Like he has everything to lose, and anything he can win from promotion, he shares it with everybody else. So that's not a very good deal from any professional environment. And to Humberto's point, like if you're working for somebody, then you owe that to that company, but not again the community. So you get paid by the company, to promote the game. So in order to bring more players to that company, but anything else you do that promotes the game in general beyond that company, again, you share with everybody else, and you still take all the risks. Unless, of course, the company, it completely like covers your buy-ins and things like that, in which case you don't care so much. So the risk is so. I think. Go ahead.
Well, I would say that these days the incentives are becoming such that promoting the game, being a cool person, being relatable, all of these things are being more incentivized in the poker space through getting spots on live streams and private games and just opportunities outside of actually playing poker. So, which I think is ultimately a great thing, right? Like we want to leverage the folks who are high level poker players, who are engaging and personable. We want to leverage those folks to help grow poker. And when they have incentive to do so, then, most people are rational and act towards their incentives. So like basically what I'm saying is, if you act like a piece of trash on a live stream, well, you don't get invited back to the live stream, right? And that's really bad.
Are you sure about that?
I was about to say.
It depends on what
How
kind.
many bracelets you have?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
You get a pass.
that's fair.
The type of personality disorders you have. I mean, all of that is actually relevant, I think.
Yeah, I think like going back, there are some people in the space that are fairly bulletproof, but I would also say that like even they have incentive as well. Things can be taken away from those folks for acting too extreme, for not reading the room, for doing things in such a way that are detrimental to poker. I think even those folks can have these privileges revoked or minimized, or their opportunities limited. So yeah,
let's talk a little bit about that. Because this is specific. I mean, a lot of we can be specific. I mean, we don't have to hide behind snarky comments. I mean, the whole poker community is talking about the way Phil Hellmuth presented himself. He was in a very soft game last week in Hustler Casino Live, and a lot of the things that he did were against what you would expect in a game of that caliber, right? I mean, he was buying short, berating winning players, and the only female player at the table, no less. And he was trying to make it all about himself and all the other things that he did. Like 3 hands later, he was talking about a hand he lost like two hands ago that nobody cares about, when there's like $250,000 in the middle. Not straddling, the only person who was not straddling. Now, I know we're laughing, but I think there is actually a lot of interesting questions, because
it's a contemptuous laugh. Like it's more of like, why on God's earth would you do such a thing?
I think I finally have an answer to that. I mean, I've been asking that question myself for a long time, but I think I may have an answer to that, or at least an approach to an answer, because it's a very good question. But before we go there, why would you do something like that? The question is, again, does he have to answer to anybody? Did he do anything wrong? Let's start with that.
Did he do anything wrong? I guess it depends on your definition of wrong.
Yes, please.
And
I like that.
Somewhat subjective, right?
Yes.
Like it's
define it however you like.
Their own. My answer would be yes. He did do things wrong, because I look at wearing the mantle of a professional poker player, being in the position that he's in, has to take responsibility and, just do a better job of representing what it means to be a professional poker player and somebody that plays for higher stakes. And yeah, like to me, and obviously Helmuth is like well known for doing these types of things and these types of shenanigans. But like I said last week, right? Like I think there's a time and a place when it's maybe the softest game that I've ever seen publicly, right? Like just the softest game that I've ever seen. And you're not having fun, you're not straddling, you're berating people. Like, dude, these are like very inexperienced poker players. I just think like it's bizarre to me that he didn't act more professional, which maybe comes to a shock to the listener of the podcast. But I think like we all have like there's a place for these like shenanigans, right? Like you're at a final table with 6 guys in a 7-card stud event or whatever it is, and you threaten to burn the Rio to the ground, and these are all like very experienced players who could care less about Helmuth, whatever he says, right? I mean, many people from that final table publicly was like, I thought it was hilarious. Like I wasn't offended at all, right? But like that's a very different situation, and like not really understanding that the two situations are different, and there's a time and a place for your poker brat persona to manifest, and that just ain't it. Yeah, to me, it rubbed me the wrong way, and I think it was wrong.
Excellent. And I think, Humberto, you wanted something to add to this.
I have a different perspective. I think that he didn't do anything wrong. So essentially what he did was how he got into the game was him acting as he does. So he was just being himself. And once he played on the game, that's essentially what he did. And so I don't think you can say he did anything wrong, because when he gets invited, he's kind of expected to act this way, and he did act this way. And then there's another thing, which is we as more experienced players have no idea how less experienced players interpreted his actions.
That's true. I would say that like did not expect not to be the only person there not straddling, right? To be short buying. I mean, that to me is like quite unexpected. The blow up, the doing his thing, that is like par for the course. But yeah,
having watched a lot of live streams, I would actually expect Phil Hellmuth to short buy in that game.
I was about to say this is very consistent with his personality, trying to get any part of EV that he can. And I think this brings back to the sort of like quote unquote answer in that question, why, or God, why would you behave like that? And I think it all comes down to some sort of like and I actually think it could explain it a lot, like some sort of like personality disorder, like narcissism, actual narcissism, because the thing about, as we're having a good, I think the cat agrees, Brad, like she's like, yes, that's right. What's the name of the cat?
Shuri. Yeah,
Shuri, okay.
Putting her tail in my face. If you're listening, you obviously can't hear it or see it, but yeah, I'm just getting swarmed.
Okay, yes, Shuri, yes, so she's totally excited, but narcissism would actually be very consistent. I mean, it's not the only explanation, but that's a theory that could be highly consistent with everything. It really doesn't matter what the situation is. It is all about the person. And, if they think, a certain situation is going to be net beneficial to them, regardless of how it looks, regardless of, what the grand scheme of things may be, then they're going for it. It's all about themselves, and sometimes they can only see the short term instead of the longer term.
My thing is like, is it even necessary? Like, Humberto brought up the point that like, that's who Phil Hellmuth is, right? That's why he gets booked on there. But I would like ask the question of, is it even necessary, right? Like with his number of bracelets, with his long-term success, this whole like poker brat thing, to me, I think he would get invited regardless, just because of his poker success, right? In the same way that like Phil Ivey gets on these streams all the time, and I have barely heard Phil Ivey say like 3 sentences on any poker stream ever, right? He's just very quiet and calculated, and he's just playing cards. I've never seen Phil Ivey pass up a straddle or buy in short. So I don't know. Yeah.
I'll let Humberto answer that, but I do have a comment on this. Yes, Humberto.
Sure.
I think the difference is that Hellmuth has been doing that, like his persona, for 30 years. And also it's not something that was kind of thrust upon him. He himself thought of the nickname Poker Brat, and he himself has this is just supposedly just how he acts.
So Humberto, just to clarify, you think this is a sort of like an artificial or a natural persona?
I think this is an actual persona. I think it's
Okay.
kind of amplified for TV, but from what I've heard, I think that's the case. And more so, what I'm saying is the way Hellmuth has gotten invited to these games originally, at least, is different from the way Phil Ivey would get invited from these games, and he's kind of just already in motion of, I'm this poker brat, this is how I act, this is how I get invited to games, and to just change would be unnecessary for him at this point, I think, in his mind.
Do you think it's a consequence of who he is, like we can call it like a happenstance or a happy coincidence, or do you think it's something that he actually cultivates because it gives him a spot in those games?
I would say it's just a consequence of who he is, and I think it leads back to what you're saying about his narcissistic tendencies.
Mm-hmm. I would actually agree with that. I think it's just that it just so happens to be, and I think actually the whole idea of the poker brat is a self-defending mechanism for him to absolve some of the things that, because he has some dissonance, right? I mean, he sits back. A lot of people are saying that he's actually a nice guy other than that. I mean, and some narcissists are, just because, somebody has a personality disorder doesn't mean they're a bad person. I mean, psychopaths are a little bit different, but the idea that, you can then have to confront some of the horrible things you said and then start giving like refunds to people or buying them tickets, because that happens a lot. It shows that you have some inner conflict, that people, at the very least, it hurts your image. So I think that idea of a poker brat is a way for him to absolve him of all his wrongdoings. And, by saying that, he says, now, you know what, now I'm a poker brat. I can be as much of an asshole as I want to be. And that actually brings another question, is, can people do whatever they want on national television and in poker environments?
What do you mean by whatever they want?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, is it okay to hide behind nicknames like that? Just this is the villain, exactly the same way that professional wrestling, going to say, okay, that's the villain, that's how he acts. I mean, that's who he is. It's perfectly fine. I mean, he can berate people because that's what he does. Do past experiences sort of like justify future tendencies?
I would say no. I would say that's a different question from like, did he do anything wrong? I don't think he did anything wrong, in the sense that, he acted like he was supposed to act, but do I feel the way that he acted is correct? No, I don't feel he did. I think that, I do agree with Brad that he is an ambassador and he should act a certain way, but more so it's I think, just like, as a human, I don't think it's good to berate other people, especially if they're brand new to the game and they don't know that much about the game. To,
I mean,
He has 40 years plus experience.
And let's be like, he's in his mid 50s, right? These
Yeah.
are like 20-something-year-old kids too.
Right.
Like that's another like weird thing. Like you know, Helmuth has kids, and you know the YouTubers
Older than them.
older than them, right? Like,
Mm.
is this how he treats his kids? Like, I don't know.
Probably.
Like,
I mean, you know, narcissists wouldn't care, right? You know, like
oh
it's
boy.
yeah.
Now
No, I
we're
mean, no, I'm actually. I think it actually makes sense, right? There's not like it could explain a lot of things, and I think if you want to wear the tag of a poker brat, you know, that's, you know, you should accept the fact that you're probably like behaving like that in at any point where the stakes are really high. You know, I guess if one of his kids beat him at a pot, yeah, he's probably going to berate them exactly the same way. Like, it makes sense, right? I mean, it would be consistent. I would be surprised if it was any other way. He wouldn't be as authentic. And I think that authentic. Yeah,
I actually have some insight into this, which is Helmuth talks about how when he was a kid, his brothers and sisters were better than him academically, and they were better than him athletically, and so games were the only thing that were really his thing. And so when he would play a game and somebody would get lucky, yes, he would berate his own brothers and sisters.
right.
well, yeah. I mean, that's your brothers and sisters. I've berated my sister more times than I can count when I was 13 years old and she was 10, right? Like,
You know
but
when you have the edge, Brad. I like it. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
I have
there you
yet
go.
to berate my kids in Candyland, though. I have yet to go nuts on them. Like, what are you thinking? How could you do that? You're so stupid. No, like
Have you tried it though, Brad?
what,
Have
berating my
you tried
kids?
berating your kids? How do you know you wouldn't like it if you haven't tried?
That's true.
It's a good point.
I think I think about a quote Helmuth said when he was berating somebody, and he tells another professional tells him to calm down, is like, to you this is poker, to me this is my life. And I think that's the difference between you and him, which is I don't think poker is like the entirety of your existence, you know.
Me?
Yeah.
You're talking to me?
Yes,
The founder of Chasing Poker Greatness. I'm right
I
here
mean, like,
talking
you're,
about poker.
you know,
I wake up, I pull up Slack, I look at strategy, I coach like 10 guys every single week. It's safe to say that poker is more a part of my life than most any human being on the face of the planet.
then berate your kids. What are you doing?
You know, the funny thing, however, like if we want to be nitty gritty and, you know, put some nuance, you know, philosophical Fridays
Sure.
and all that, I think there is a fundamental difference to have your entire life revolving around poker and actually poker be who you are, like to let it actually give a meaning to your existence, that you basically you exist for that. It's as if it owns you in some way.
Yeah,
Right?
it's identity.
Identity, right? It becomes your own identity, which again, I mean, the psychologist will be much more helpful in a situation like this. But like to a point where this thing becomes you, like in a pathological way, could be, you know, a very different ball game, because you can understand, you know what, yeah, I mean, I spend my every, you know, every hour of the day thinking about poker or whatever, but then when it comes to family comes first, or other things come first, you know. But if it's the thing that defines you, it might be difficult to draw the line. And I'm not saying it's one way or another, but I can say that it could be different.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to your earlier question, right? Of like, is it okay to hide behind the persona, right? Or to, you know, use this persona as like a get out of poker jail free card? I think the answer is no. And I'm actually like shifting a lot of my opinions here on Helmuth, like kind of on the spot. But like, the reality is like he's been incentivized to do what he does, right? There's been a lot of, he has a book that is called Poker Brat. So like he's made a lot of money with this persona. And then at some point, like the world evolves, and like hopefully the incentive structure that currently exists will fade away, and that type of behavior just won't be acceptable anymore. Like, I don't think it does anything to make poker better. I think it does a lot of things to prop up Phil Hellmuth personally.
So you don't think his persona actually attracts viewership and interest?
I think it does. I mean,
Okay.
it's got to, right? Like in the same way that like you can't take your eyes off a car crash, right? Like polarizing people, polarizing figures, draw eyeballs, and I think that's pretty indisputable.
I actually
Go ahead.
think that does it really? If anybody else acted like Helmuth does, I feel that there's no way, especially if they were like brand new to the game. I think there's no way that they would have
I
the
mean,
acceptance of Helmuth.
well, it's just a fact that polarization draws people in. It's compelling, right? That's why Doug does all the things that he does. He's very polarizing, right? And it gets eyeballs and it gets people to watch your stuff.
Can I just make a quick comment here?
Yeah.
I agree that polarization is sometimes a necessary condition. I'm not sure if it's sufficient. In other words, if we took all the polarizing people in the world, including our favorite Uncle Jimmy, right? So if we brought him here in the podcast, you know, I'm not sure anybody would be very interested in what he has to say, because everybody has like some sort of like an uncle who complains about all the stuff all the time. So most of these people are annoying and nobody wants to pay attention to. So the question is it, it could be necessary, maybe not, actually it's not even necessary, but is it sufficient? So just the fact that somebody's polarizing doesn't make it, you know, doesn't make them popular.
No, they need to be a compelling figure as well.
Right.
Like you can't just be like, you have to have like people that like you and people that hate you, right? With kind of like nothing in between. So if you're just shitty, well then everybody just hates you and that's not good enough.
I would agree with that. And I would also add that, like to me, and I've mentioned that before, I think Phil Hellmuth is incredibly interesting. Now, let's not confuse the word interesting with, you know, other synonyms, right?
Like when somebody plays a hand interesting. Oh, that tells you after a pot, you played that hand very interesting.
Exactly. It can be interpreted in many different ways. But I think he's a very puzzling personality in general, because again, he's very compelling, very successful, and he does things that most people would consider hurting his bottom line. But again, it could help him in the longer term. And it's very difficult I think to decipher. But a lot of these tendencies could be explained from a deeply, you know, narcissistic personality, I think.
Yeah, let's get Hellmuth and a, you know, psychologist on here, and let's really have
his wife even.
Yeah, let's have an intervention, Philosophical Friday podcast Hellmuth intervention.
But that actually give us a really good segue, you know, because one of the things that nobody can accuse Hellmuth of is that he's not being authentic, right? I mean, he's totally authentic. I mean, most people, again, we get the sense as poker players. Does any of you get, let me actually ask, because I have like two great poker players and a guy with a beard here. So would you say that would you say that Phil is authentic?
Yes.
I would say yes.
Okay.
But it's also tough to say, given that we don't know him personally.
Right, exactly. And I mean, it's the sense as the poker players. I mean, I get that vibe. I used to, you know, play at Bellagio a lot, and the floor there was like, you know, Duncan, this guy is fake. This is all an image. It's like, is it really though? Like, I mean, I've met.
I don't think you can fake it.
Yeah, it's so difficult to fake. I mean, you know, like all the, you know, spidey senses go on.
Can you imagine Helmuth like writing down, like when he's in the evening, like, I'm gonna burn this place down to the ground? Like, that sounds like a good line to me. Like, I'm just gonna bust that out.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about that, you know, authenticity versus proper etiquette. So what is more appealing? Where is the line? And can you perhaps think of, because again, I can think of two opposing examples. On one hand, we have Phil Hellmuth, you know, which is the definition of authenticity, check, proper etiquette, not so much. And then we have someone like Phil Galfand, who's incredible with like etiquette. I mean, I would also say he's authentic. So maybe that's not a good example. But
you're not gonna say Phil Galfand's a faker. He's fake nice. No.
I love Phil Galfand. He's, you know, like one of my favorite poker players and human beings. So I can't say anything wrong about it. But The question is, what do you think is more compelling? You know, like we concentrate on a person who knows authentic, like Phil Hellmuth, and then a person like Phil Galfand, who, you know, arguably sitting at that table probably wouldn't be incredibly entertaining to watch. Another question is,
I think they're
yes.
both. So I think they're both just very similar, like Hellmuth and then somebody that's kind of fake or inauthentic, right? I think that they're both kind of lazy. That's my honest opinion. I think Hellmuth's lazy. He gets angry. It's much easier to just be angry and say whatever it is that's on your mind than to actually do work and try to do better moving forward. And I think the inauthentic person that is just says things and you know that they don't mean them. Just everybody's met somebody at the poker table that is just as fake as you can be. I think that's also lazy, right? It's like, just learn how to be yourself and don't pet the fish. Don't patronize other human beings who have intelligence. So to me, like, they're both very similar. The person, like somebody like Hellmuth, I think it's lazy, and I think the inauthentic person is also lazy. But for whatever it's worth, I would rather have Hellmuth than the faker, because I just playing with somebody that's like that. I just can't. It drives me nuts. Like when somebody's just not authentic to who they are, and when you know that they're just trying to get one over on everybody. That's my personal preference. I'd rather be yelled at.
Humberto?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that I really dislike people who really kind of coddled the fish, and yeah, I would rather get yelled at too, I guess.
Yeah, which could explain a lot. I could explain why he's so popular, right? We could explain why there's so many, people willing to watch, the streams.
It's not hard to genuinely care about people, right? Like that to me just boggles my mind. It's not hard to be sitting here, like we're sitting here playing a game, right? And there's 9 people here. The whole goal is to take each other's money, right? This is known when you sit down at the table. I'm playing to take your chips. You're playing to take my chips. We're playing this game against each other. But that doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that you can't be nice or civil to the human beings that you're interacting with, right? Or treat them with respect. Because as I've said many times, playing in high stakes poker games, most everybody at the table that's a non-professional poker player is more successful than me in life. Else they wouldn't have the funds or the means to be playing this game. So that to me, like when people just treat other people with disrespect and are quite patronizing, it just drives me up a wall.
Right. But I would say it also depends where they're coming from, right? Again, if somebody has a personality disorder, I'm not saying they're being justified. I mean,
yeah, you're saying they're authentic in their shittiness.
Correct. And it's like, they just have to be like, it's incredibly difficult for them to do it. And once again,
fair.
we don't have to deal in the same way we don't have to deal with psychopaths, right? I mean, some states go as far as actually executing them. I'm not advocating that by any means, but I'm just saying that, there are people who just, either
I bet people's behavior would be much better if there's an executioner walking around poker rooms.
That'd be, yeah, I mean, that would be funny. So, but let me ask you another question though. Who would you rather have at the table? Again, I'm a big fan of Phil Galfand, but like, again, with these amateur players, would you have someone like Phil Hellmuth or Phil Galfand?
It's going to be hard for me to say.
Against or to watch?
To watch. We're talking about watching. Yeah, like you. Yeah.
I would choose Galfand just personally because I really enjoy watching high level play.
Let me ask you this: who would you think an amateur would like more to watch? Like Phil Hellmuth and a bunch of amateurs, or Phil Galfand and a bunch of amateurs?
I think by far Hellmuth. I think Hellmuth really shows off some version of poker's like reality TV.
Right. So yeah, this is interesting.
It's all like projection though, right? Like, I mean, for all I know, like the YouTubers that battled against Helmuth loved the experience, and they
Oh,
had
yeah.
a super ton of fun, right? And like they want to do
Absolutely.
it again. So like, you know, my opinion and my perspective is quite different than the folks who are actually in the arena playing with him. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I would rather watch Phil Galfond as well. Like it's hard for me to say anybody other than Phil Galfond, but like, you know, we'd have to take a poll of the folks that battled against Helmuth, you know?
Absolutely. And that's why I'm saying it's such a difficult thing to dissect, because
Mhm.
people are having a lot of fun. I mean, I know Ninja and Phil were like hitting it off. They were having a lot of fun time. Even Alex, she was like, she was niddling Phil the whole time. So, I
Yeah.
mean, now to be fair, we're talking about very successful streamers and the type of abuse they get through chat on a daily basis. Like Phil Hellmuth is a walk in the park. I mean, you've no idea
That's
like what's
true.
going into these streams. I mean, yeah, it's just crazy.
I
And
can't play a video game without getting yelled at and harassed and just the worst things that any human has ever
oh
said
yeah.
to me through the voice of an 11-year-old kid playing on the other end, just beating my ass. Like it's terrible. So like in that sense, professional gamers have probably dealt with substantially more abuse from 13-year-old, 14-year-old kids going through all their hormones and puberty who are just I can't even imagine that actually.
I think you may be underestimating the amount of adults who play video games, and like how brutal adults can be. At least the kids are kids. You will know from the things that they're saying that they're kids. But all caps and all that stuff. But you can see some adults raging. I know because I've seen them.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
rage, but I just don't ever think to like put my headset on and like rage at the people I'm playing against, you know?
Right. So I guess another question we can ask is, like, how would you rate our poker image? And that's actually a very broad question, right? I mean, how would you rate our entire poker image? And maybe I can share some of my experience too with the academic community. Spoiler alert, it's not good. So how would you rate our poker image in general? Humberto, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. To the general population, I would say our image is like a 2.5 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Something very low.
Mm-hmm.
How do
And
you know though?
Just from my experience talking to people, most people, first of all, don't know very much about poker. Like the first question you get is like, "Oh, can you count cards?" And they don't know that much. But then
can you?
afterwards, I cannot, but after that, it's like, oh, like they really look. I would say something that Doyle Brunson said, which is like they like look at you like a second class citizen.
Yeah,
I still
I
think
think
that's somewhat true today.
I mean, I actually disagree, and I think that's projection from you because I've had so many interactions with human beings that are not poker players that don't really understand the world of poker that are just interested, and I never get the sense that they're like looking down on me or judging me. But
Let me ask you a question on that because I think it's important.
mhm.
Do you think they respect you, or do you think they respect poker?
I don't know. I mean, probably not poker, but the thing is like the original question, right? Of like, what's the outside perception of the poker world? Well, I don't think the person that doesn't know what poker is a good judge. Like that's not the audience that we're polling here. They have to have some cursory understanding of what poker is to make that judgment, I would think, right? Else, it doesn't matter what Helmuth does. It doesn't matter what any poker pro does. They're just going to watch Rounders or they're going to watch some poker movie where everybody's cheating or Tilt on ESPN, where the whole point of the show is just for everybody to cheat everybody else. And then that's where their perception's going to be. And, doesn't matter what ambassadors or promoters of the game say or do because they never hold any influence over that person.
I see. But you don't think that a lot of the positive, or at least the neutral or the positive, whatever reaction you get has to do with you specifically, that they know they're talking to you? And
Yes, I'm much more likable than Humberto. I think that maybe that's the key.
That's just the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to do with me, because that's what else are they going to judge, right? Like if they have no basis to judge the profession or the game, then the next thing that they're going to do is judge the person that they're talking to.
That's correct, exactly. And I think that a lot of people, when they talk, at least personal experience, a sample of one, right? When they come to you, usually it's because there is some sort of cognitive dissonance. It's like, how come a nice person like you has like a terrible, profession like that? There must be something interesting here. Like, help me resolve that dissonance. Help me resolve that issue. And I mean, academically, that our image has hurt me tremendously, because I tried to teach that class for credit, and at UCLA, and basically they said, we have a huge issue and backlash from the parents, and we have to be incredibly careful, and I respect that. I understand that. I'm not, if anything, and anybody who's listening to the podcast knows that I'm not trying to promote. I don't even place bets in roulette, like to get an idea. I don't gamble at a casino at any other game that I don't think I have an edge. I'm a huge nit when it comes to gambling, like the worst.
Yeah.
Right.
The parents have the problem with playing poker, but not so much the $100,000 in educational expenses that they have to pay back over the course of their lifetime. That probably doesn't guarantee a job anyway, right?
There you go.
The worst gamble that you could ask for, right?
There you go. Exactly. Absolutely right. And that's the irony, and they don't get. And the idea that life is, we take constant risks, and then you help people understand, not necessarily find the answers, but at least learn how to ask the right questions. When that would be a right question to ask. Am I gonna ever get a return on that, on that investment? Is college the only way? Spoiler alert, the answer is a resounding no. And this comes from somebody who spent 20 years in education, so that's not, the answer is a resounding no. So that's what poker can teach. Poker can teach the idea of learning how to take responsible gambles, understanding that gambles are unavoidable around us, so we might as well embrace it, instead of just saying, oh, it's not there. My kid doesn't have to gamble. My kid doesn't have to be what we don't want to be is degenerates. But other than that, gambling is unavoidable. Brad was saying last week, you get out of your house, the dangers out there. Sorry, Brad.
Yeah. I mean, you get a job, right? Like, this is sort of how I was raised, and the career path of most of my family is they get a job, they work at it for like 40 years, and then they retire, and then that's it. Right. And like, that's stability. But to me, I watched my grandfather when, his business changed. They stripped away everything that he had worked for his whole life on a dime to save the company money. Right. And then he was forced into retirement. And like, I've seen that scenario play out again and again and again. And the reality is, when you're just a cog in the wheel, and your company can let go of you at any time, that's quite a gamble. That's quite a risk. You can wake up one day having all your bills paid and having a plan, and then the next day you wake up and you have no plan and you have no job, and all of a sudden, say you're in your 50s, right? How do you get a career that pays as much as the one that just fired you? Because there's entry level people, like, right? So it's like, all of that is a gamble, and like, really, to me, that's something that like most human beings just miss about this life experience, is that like, all these decisions, there's inherent risk when you put all your eggs in the one job basket. Well, if that person doesn't want you around, well, all of a sudden you've got a major problem.
And let me double down on this, because actually you're making an excellent point, and you're talking about the private sector. The government, who some people rely on, can be even worse. As you know, I'm Greek, and there was a financial crisis a few years ago. There still is going in Greece. So my father's pension got cut to 1/3 at some point. So here's a person who's been working 40 years, steady job to have a nice and retirement, and all of a sudden the government decides, what, too much debt, we're just going to cut the pensions of everybody to 1/3, so you guys cannot afford to pay rent anymore. So you're absolutely correct. So if people understood what gambling means, what taking risk is, people sometimes make fun of me for having like doing so many different things, but that's That's the real thing. That's how you protect yourself. You might diversify business-wise. You do not say, oh, I'm going to keep one job. Do you know how risky this is? Having one job for one company, this is such a huge risk. But if people don't understand risk, that's the thing, you know. So yeah, but and it's okay. I mean, I don't understand risk either. We're not wired to understand risk. Risk is a complicated thing. That's why we have to study about it. Very well said, Brad. Yes. But of course, if you were to say something like that in academia, you know, I don't think they would listen to you. That's the problem. Even though you're laying out such an incredible argument, you know, like
academia has never really accepted me, and I've had no interest in engaging with them. So, could really, not care about that side of it, right? Because like I just don't understand, because it's so obvious to me that thinking about it from a different perspective, or like just dismissing that, I just don't understand how you can just outright dismiss the risks that we all take in every single area of our lives every single day. It's a part of being human, and to me it's one of my favorite parts of being a human. It's doing something and not knowing what's going to happen. Right? Like that to me is quite fun. It's enhances my human experience.
Exactly. And if I were to go a little bit, you know, sort of like philosophical on this, I think the reason is because people think that risk can be eradicated. This is very similar to, okay, you know, I lost with a set here. Duncan, how do I play this hand so that I don't lose with the set? I don't want to lose with the set. How do I change this? You know, was it a mistake that I raised there on 4 to a flush? Maybe I could have, you know, folded earlier. Like I don't put the thin value bet on the river. I don't do the bet folding. Maybe I should, you know, what should I do? Should I turn it into a bluff? Like, how do I turn this hand so I don't lose with it?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is you can't. You embrace the loss, and that is the thing I think that humans have the hardest time with. Or, you know, like, at some point, we have to feel comfortable with loss. At some point, we have to feel comfortable with not knowing. At some point, we have to feel comfortable with risk. That is the only way out, because those things are not going to be eliminated, exactly the same way that we have to feel comfortable with our own death, if we were to get super deep about it.
Yeah, most questions that come in the community from you know, the lower stakes players who are trying to grind their way up are framed in such a way that are not actually looking for strategic feedback. They're framed in a way that's trying to avoid the negative emotion that they felt when they lost. And that's it, right?
That's it.
And the answer is shockingly that you just have to learn how to deal with the emotions of a negative outcome better. That's it. That's all you can do. Right? And that's really what it boils down to. Like there's no risk style of poker where you avoid making mistakes. It just isn't possible. And so, you know, most people want strategic feedback when really they're looking for like emotional support.
Correct. So they're looking for how to go to the 5th stage of grief in the Kubler-Ross, right? Get to acceptance. That's basically
right.
what we have to do. But to go back to that question, okay, so Humberto gave a 2.5 out of 10 of our poker image. Brad, what number would you give, just for fun? Like, how is...
I don't know. I don't think I can answer the question, because I mean, it depends, right? Like, where's the person coming? Do they just watch World Poker Tour on TV? Do they just watch WSOP? In which case, probably pretty high, right? Do they participate in poker Twitter every day? Well, probably pretty low.
Let's say that we interviewed like 1,000 people around the world randomly, and we asked them to rate, you know, poker from 0 to 10. You know, like what average do you think that?
And what is the criteria here? The question is like the image. What is their perceived image?
Yes.
Of the
How
game?
do you perceive? You know, like what do you think of poker as part of society? Like,
I think it would be much higher than you would expect.
Okay, what would I expect, and what would you think?
Well,
just curious.
Much higher than Humberto expects.
Okay.
Much higher than the 2.5. I think that it's got to be 7 to 8.
Okay.
I would think.
Okay, but I do have a follow-up question for Humberto, because I think it's very important. So, what do you think, if anything, can be done, Humberto, so that 2.5 becomes 3, 4, and maybe 5, or higher than that.
If we try really hard.
If we try really hard.
And if I'm not pessimistic about it,
Oh, you can be pessimistic. You can say nothing
okay.
can be done. You can do anything you want. This is
I think that we've, poker's been around like long time, hundreds of years, and I think we're at least at an age where it's becoming more sophisticated. Probably, about as sophisticated as it'll ever be with solvers and everything, and as much as it will ever be sportified, we'll say. And I still think that there's still a stigma around poker, and so I can't imagine that there's much that can be done. I think a small thing that can be done is what PokerStars was doing before, which is having ambassadors be sports icons.
Mm-hmm. Who would you consider like good ambassador? If you were to give me 5 names, 10 names, however many names you want, not in a particular order, like which names come to mind, like as I was speaking?
Who are actual poker players or
anybody you think would be good for the game? Maybe the ex-president, Obama. I mean, he used to play poker a lot, so I don't know. Whoever comes to mind.
You see, I only know people in poker, which is the problem.
That's okay. That's okay. You can say those names. Yeah, whatever we have our experiences, whatever our experience may be.
Who's already an ambassador? Can it be?
Who either is an ambassador or you would like them to be an ambassador, because again,
this is your magic wand, Humberto.
Oh, I would say Brad.
Brad, yeah. Well, I would agree with you 100%. Yeah,
I would say Brad would be a great ambassador. And
I was gonna say Tom Brady, but
Tom
Brady. Yeah, Tom Brady. No, you see, I agree with you with Brad, because he has 2 important, I think, characteristics. Like he's very personable and sociable, which I think is important at the poker table, and at the same time he cares for humans. Like he is he's a family person, a real family person. Not any serious personality disorders that we can see, or you're hiding them very well, Brad. So congratulations either way. I think that's actually that's very good. Yeah,
I feel pretty humbled and don't really know what to say, honestly. That's very kind, Humberto.
You can pick your own. You can pick like somebody like Phil Galfin, people like that.
Tom Brady. I already did it.
Tom Brady. Okay, you were serious.
Manning,
okay,
like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, if we're looking at like actual people that have
influence,
clout and influence in like the United States, then I would say
Michael
those
Phelps,
kind
maybe?
of Michael Phelps, who
is actually a poker player.
Right. That's why I mentioned it. Yeah. I mean, and Michael Jordan's played poker before. Bill Gates likes to play poker. So all of these people are,
yeah, probably the people that we revere the most. We elected a reality TV show host as the president of the United States, right? So it's clear the things that we value. So I would just say, somebody like Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, just the icons of the sports world would probably be my first guess or my first choices.
Beautiful. So it sounds to me, and I think that's interesting. It sounds to me, and it would make a lot of sense. And like my wife said, Duncan, finish your sentence. I'm going to try to. It's difficult sometimes, but it sounds to me that some of these magic wand solutions come from outside the poker world. And I think that tells us something. I think that's just even instinctively, I think it's telling of something. It's telling us that, like as poker players, we're inside our bubble and we have specific limitations that were very difficult to escape from. So if something could help poker, could be some sort of like outside help or influence. And I actually felt that when I didn't watch the Hustle Casino live last week when we recorded the show, but then because everybody was talking about it, I watched it, and it feels completely different than anything I've ever seen. It's such a celebration of the game. It's beautiful, like money's flying around, amateurs are winning pots, which is great. There's huge tipping of the dealers. People are talking, they're playing until 4 o'clock in the morning. Everything is great, except for one thing that we talked about, but but everything is
the
so
ambassador.
Yeah, exactly. Except
ambassador.
for anything that is poker related, you know what
Right.
I mean? It's like everything that's coming from the poker world. It's so ironic, and at the same time, I'm dealing with my own cognitive dissonances, right? Because here we have, arguably one of the greatest tournament players in the world, at least judging by bracelets. And we see that, something doesn't add up, like there's this conflict, and it's such a beautiful celebration of the game. I don't know if how do you guys feel? Did you guys watch it? How do you feel about watching that session? Any emotions any thoughts? Humberto, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I thought that Hellmuth wasn't as egregious as I was kind of led to believe from my friends. Hellmuth, I think, did do some stuff that I don't think he should have done. After that, I thought the action was unbelievable. Like, and from the professionals as well. Like, well, only Alan Keating really. Tom Dolan was kind of asleep, but Alan was like all in 200K with 9-4 offsuit or something. I'm like, what's going on? And then I would say the most action was driven from Alan Keating and Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast obviously straddling for 25,000.
He's
and
beast.
yeah, it was pretty much all of the non-professionals were in there just open raising to like 10x and then getting min 3-bet by Mr. Beast, and it was fun and exciting, and I haven't watched an 8-hour stream in a long time, and I watched the whole thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was interesting, and the lines too, like some of the lines were absolutely hilarious, as you would expect from successful, streamers. Brad?
I haven't watched the stream in full.
Yeah.
Unlike Humberto, I don't have 8 hours to invest.
All the needles.
And you're more likable, Brad. You're living a much better existence than me. Brad, do you want to bet on who has the better existence?
Put your money where your mouth is. I like this.
How do we quantify this, Humberto? No, I mean, I think that, yeah, there's. I'm kind of at a loss right now. So could you ask the question again?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, what did you think about, the vibe of the game? What kind of emotions did that game trigger you compared to other games you've watched in the past?
Oh, it was joy.
Joy.
Right?
Okay.
Like it was joy. Everybody was having fun. Everybody was having a blast. Well, except for one person. And I think that, like, that's the beauty of the game. That's why we all fell in love with the game. It reminded me of playing a $20 freeze out with all of your friends when nobody knows what the hell is going on, right? Which are some of the most joyful memories and experiences of my entire poker career. So, like, yeah, I think that was a great callback to all those things. And yeah, I
would agree with you 100%. And like, that's part of the reason why we sort of like came back to that conversation, to be honest with you, because again, I sort of like, watched that hand where everybody was saying Phil Hellmuth was angling, and I mean, it was clearly not angling. He was trying to give the cards to Tom. I was like, okay, there's nothing interesting about that whole show. But it turns out, it was so different than everything that I've watched before, and it reminded me, of what a great opportunity it is to actually let other people come into the game, which I thought it would be interesting, and what potentially, I mean, it's difficult to tell, a lost opportunity with some of the B rating and all of that stuff. It could have been, or maybe not. I mean, because who knows?
Well, it seemed to be a success, and everybody's talking about it. I would say one thing that I did learn was the influence that the commentators have on the perception of actions in the game, right? Because I think a lot of, like what Humberto was saying, that he watched it back because everybody was talking about how terrible Hellmuth was and all of that. Like, I think that stemmed pretty directly from Tuchman thinking that Hellmuth folded and announcing that he folded when he slid his cards to Tom Dwan, which I'm not blaming Tuchman here, but that, as I said last week, I think that was a camera angle issue more than anything. But like, and it, you kind of, as somebody that has watched a lot of sports over the course of my life, you recognize when you watch a football game the influence that the commentators have on decision making, because they judge things in one way, and then all of a sudden the audience is now primed to look at things through only that lens. So yeah, I would say that, like, commentators actually have a lot more influence than I really thought. Is one big takeaway from that whole thing.
Excellent. And would you guys like to see more of these in the future?
Yeah, of course, I would.
100%. I think to what we were saying about how to really help poker is to get outside people to play and to be on live streams. I mean, I think the most interesting part of the live stream was 100% all of the gamers and the chess players.
Yeah, and if you're a high-level gamer or YouTuber, send me an email, brad@chasingpokergreatness.com. We'll get you coached up, and that would be something that I would be interested in, is these folks who are, you know, relatively new to the game, looking to join the game, helping coach them up and teach them.
Sure. And it looked like that Alex, like I got that sense that Alex had been, at least she's a chess player, so she knows how to process information, and many of these guys are gamers also. You know, they know how to process information. It was actually amazing in certain spots how they adapted, right? I mean, there were situations where they would say, you know, Phil, I'm not going to give you any action. You know, they realized it was funny. They were actually, you know, responding to that. But speaking of which
is exactly what you want in that game, right? A game where everybody's giving action to everybody, and the one poker pro is the player at the table they don't want to give action to. Like, that's
they're smart kids.
God.
Yes, Humberto.
Ninja actually trapped Alan Keating, so he knew Alan was just putting in all of the money, and he check called top pair, top kicker.
Yeah. That was awesome. Yeah, though it was a lot of fun. I mean, these guys are very, very, very intelligent. So now that brings us to, I guess, one final question. At the risk of potentially ruining something which is great, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What would you fix about, you know, this? Again, magic wand. What would you fix about this stream if you were to do it again? If you were working for high stakes productions, what would you tell them to do differently? And maybe again, start with you know, Humberto, our guest today. How would you do it?
Maybe I would make it six-handed and just literally take out Phil and Tom that were no action, and six-handed incentivizes you to play more hands, so that would be more exciting.
So 6 players, all of them YouTubers, like all of them no professionals?
I think we can have one professional that's a lot of action, say Alan Keating.
Okay.
Putting in infinite money, because I think there should be some, like,
there needs to be a high level player
exactly
representing. I think, like, I think that there's a segment of the audience that only wants to watch for watching higher level players, and I don't think Alan Keating is like really trying to play at a very high level in that setting.
Incidentally, what do you guys think he was going through his mind? Like, was he trying to be invited there again? Was he just trying to put the gamble?
I think he was trying to get action in other games.
Okay. And is that action worth $1 million? Who knows? Maybe
1.1 million even.
Yeah, 1.1. That's right.
There's somebody out there that has the data points and can make that judgment. And so I guess you can just extrapolate from that as you will.
For sure. What would you do, Brad? Magic wand and everything. What would you change?
I would just replace Helmuth with a more fun poker player, like, you know, maybe Esfandiari, or just somebody that's fun, talkative, that's going to straddle, but is also, you know, going to play high level poker at the same time.
Good. Yeah, so some people suggested JRB or Daniel Negreanu. I think Esfandiari is an excellent choice. I think he's very good at talking.
Daniel would be a good choice as well. Maybe Phil Locke. You know, he would do some crazy things, and obviously straddle and all that stuff.
Last I saw Phil Locke, he was playing at the $500,000 guarantee tournament in Hustler about a few years ago. I haven't seen him in a while. I don't know his whereabouts.
Yeah, me neither. Last time I saw him, he was playing high stakes Commerce. We were battling in cash games at Commerce, but I think he's still around. He's still doing his thing.
That's really good.
Okay, put in Phil Locke and Antonio Esfandiari.
Oh yes.
And then all the streamers, and then that to me is like, oh, that's a recipe for amazingness.
Do you guys remember a TV show that, I mean, Humberto, probably you do if you've watched a lot of the stuff, like a show called I Bet You that
Yes.
Antonio,
Yeah.
how awesome would it be if it was for the listener? Tell us what was that show? Tell us a little bit for the listener. What
It
was
was
that?
essentially Phil Locke and Antonio gambling on literally like whatever, you know, who
Just
can
walking
run across the
around.
street the fastest. Like,
Yeah,
I have to say I watched that show as well.
that was
Oh,
so
wow.
good. My favorite was when they were betting. I mean, you know, they were betting on a woman's underwear. That was like the best thing. And then who's gonna ask the question was the most interesting part of it all. The color of her underwear. That was amazing. That would be interesting. You know, having and actually doing side bets. That would be amazing. Like
Yeah, just the needling and like
needling.
the mocking. I mean,
Yeah.
it would just be endless fun, in my opinion.
Yeah, and play the London game, whatever it was called,
Latin things, yeah.
Yeah, right, Latin things, right, exactly. So
Mhm.
that would be pretty interesting, I think. And then they can get involved. They can get the streamers involved.
You guys just call me. I'm the booking guy. I'll put these matchups together, and you guys can go.
Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen. Excellent. So what did we did not cover? I think we covered a whole range of things. Is there anything else anybody wanted
Was
to?
there a topic? I can't even remember what the topic was.
Promoting
think
poker,
Yeah, we went here and everywhere. But no, I don't have anything else. I think it was a great discussion, and thank you, Humberto, for hopping on. Really appreciate your time and your energy.
For having me, guys.
No, absolutely. Humberto, do you have anything else to add? Anything that you want to see, or you saw anything that surprised you? Or
I would say that we could also do some more of doing the other side of having poker professionals go into other areas. I think Daniel Negreanu did something, I think it was called Pog Champs, which is like a chess tournament. So stuff like that I think would be great.
Yeah, that would be really, really nice. Yeah. So, and we can get some exposure.
Tom Wheaton at Above the Felt, he's also doing a good job of like basically putting poker players, getting them gigs through his connections in the business world and all that sort of thing. And I think more stuff like that is, ultimately good for poker as well.
Excellent. And I think, Brad, we do have a pod coming up at some point to talk about games, some things that, us poker players would be interested in. I know you mentioned Path of Exile here before, so wait to hear all about it at some point.
Oh boy. Yeah, let's not talk about those days.
The dark days of PoE. Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure, gentlemen. It was really, really fun.
Yeah, great stuff, guys. I'll see you next week.